Velk found the gap on a Tuesday. He did not know it was a Tuesday. That was a human word, and he had never learned human words. He only knew it was the 43rd work cycle of the season, and that he had been staring at the same database for 6 hours, and that his tea had gone cold again. His office had 17 monitors. Each one showed a different piece of the galaxy's history: wars, treaties, migrations, collapses. He had spent 140 years reading these records. He had filed reports on all of them. He had color-coded his grief: red for extinction, orange for partial collapse, yellow for near miss. His desk was very organized. His life was very organized. Then he found the gap, and nothing was organized after that. It started small. A reference number in an old file pointed to another file. That file pointed to a third. The third file was supposed to contain the full record of the Kreth Dominion, a powerful, aggressive species that had spent 2,000 years expanding across the outer sectors. They were known for it. Conquest was their word for breakfast. The file opened. 1 page. Kreth Dominion. Status dissolved. Cycle 7440. Cause, internal. That was all. Velk sat very still. He was Theresi, and Theresi were a calm species by nature. They had 6 limbs, and mild telepathic sense, and a deep, biological discomfort with things that did not add up. The Kreth Dominion had been a civilization of 4 billion. They had held 19 star systems. They had a military fleet that took up half a sector on the old maps. 1 page. Internal cause. He filed an inquiry. The Bureau sent him back a letter about processing times. He waited 4 days and filed another inquiry. This time, they sent him a different letter. Different font. He went back to the Kreth file and looked at their expansion maps. Their trajectory was clear. Every 10 years they had pushed further out, always in the same general direction, like a tide that only knew one shore. He followed the line with his finger on the screen. Sector by sector, decade by decade. The line pointed at a region the old maps labeled in small letters. Human-occupied space. Status: primitive. Threat level: negligible. He noted this. He filed it under interesting in his personal logs, which was the strongest word he allowed himself. Then he pulled 11 more files. Not Kreth files. Random ones. He chose them the way you choose things when you are pretending you are not looking for something. Carelessly, quickly, without a system. 3 of them ended the same way. Different species, different sectors, different centuries. Same internal cause. Same dissolved and gone, and no one had made a real record of why. He laid the 3 files next to the Kreth file on his screen. He drew their expansion trajectories on his map overlay. His hand was steady. He was Theresi. Theresi hands did not shake. All 4 trajectories pointed the same direction. All 4 civilizations had dissolved before they arrived. He stared at the map for a long time. Then he went back to the database and searched more carefully. Not randomly this time. He searched for every civilization in the last 4,000 years that had a recorded expansion trajectory pointing toward human space. He told himself he was doing routine research. He told himself it was probably nothing. He told himself the pattern was a coincidence, because patterns were often coincidences, and he was a scientist, and scientists did not leap. He found 18 more. 22 civilizations in total. 22 expansion paths. 22 dotted lines that ended before they arrived, all of them neatly labeled with internal cause and nothing else. He laid them all on the map. The room was quiet. The monitors hummed. His cold tea sat at the edge of his desk. It was not a dotted line anymore. It was a wall. A perfect, unbroken perimeter drawn in dead civilizations, curving around human space like someone had taken a compass and drawn a circle and said, "This far," and then you dissolve. He picked up his tea. He drank it cold because his hands needed something to do. Then he put it down, and it spilled, just a little, across the edge of the craft file. He stared at the small brown stain spreading across the word negligible. He cleaned it up, carefully, with the sleeve of his robe. He sat back down. He thought about what he knew. He was an analyst for the Galactic Continuity Bureau. His job was to find patterns, document them, and report them. He had done this job for 140 years. He had reported on the collapse of 3 civilizations, 2 near-extinction events, and 1 incident involving a neutron star that nobody liked to talk about. He had filed every report calmly and with the correct font size. This was going to be harder to file. He thought about what the pattern meant. There were 3 possible explanations for a perimeter made of dead civilizations around a species the old maps called negligible. First, coincidence. 22 coincidences over 4,000 years. He allowed himself exactly 4 seconds to consider this before moving on. Second, humans had a protector. Some larger species, some hidden alliance, some guardian civilization watching from a distance and quietly ending anyone who came too close. He pulled the surrounding sector records. He looked for any species with the reach, the intelligence, and the patience for this. He found nothing. The space around human territory was not full of hidden guardians. It was just space. Third option. He did not write the third option down. He looked at it in his mind, and then he looked away, the way you look away from something very bright. He opened a new document. He typed carefully. He was Theresi, and Theresi were precise, and precision was the only thing he had left to hold on to right now. The document was a priority research request to the Galactic Council. Subject line: why does no one attack humans? He read it back 3 times. He hit send. He stood up. He walked to the window. Outside, the station rotated slowly through the dark, and the stars did what stars always did. Nothing and everything, and all of it at once. He thought about the perimeter. He thought about 22 civilizations. He thought about one word: negligible. He went home. He made tea. Fresh this time. He stood in his kitchen and watched it steep and tried to think about something else. His route to work, the report he owed on the Venth border adjustment, the small administrative things that made up a life. He poured the tea. He spilled it. His hands were very still, he told himself. He cleaned up the second spill of the day and went to bed and lay in the dark and looked at the ceiling and thought about a line on a map that bent in a perfect curve. He did not sleep. Outside his window, the stars held their positions, the way they always did, steady and old, and keeping every secret they had ever been given. There were a lot of secrets out there. He was only just beginning to understand that. The council approved the investigation on a Thursday. Velk did not know that was a Thursday either. He only knew it was 12 days after he sent the request, and that the approval letter used the phrase low priority inquiry 4 times in 3 paragraphs, which told him everything about how seriously they were taking it. He filed the letter. He started the investigation anyway. His first interview was with a cartographer. Her name was Sue, and she was Uleni, which meant she was very old and very small, and had 4 eyes that all pointed in slightly different directions, like she was always watching 4 different futures at once. She had been making maps of dead space for 300 years. Dead space was her word for it, the regions where civilizations used to be and weren't anymore. There was more of it than most people knew. She met Velk in a small room with no windows and spread her maps on the table between them. They were beautiful in the way that sad things are sometimes beautiful. All these lines and names and colors, and then just empty space where a world used to be. She showed him 18 dissolution events. He already knew about most of them, but she had something he didn't have. She had the trajectories, the flight paths, the expansion plans, pulled from partial archives and salvaged records, and 2 cases where she had simply done the math and extrapolated where they were going based on where they had been. She laid a clear overlay on top of the map, and the trajectories appeared in pale blue lines, all of them reaching out like arms, all of them pointing the same direction. He already knew this, but seeing it on her map, in her colors, was different from seeing it on his own screen. Her maps were old and careful and very honest. "These are the ones we know about," she said. She reached under the table and brought out a second set of maps. He waited. She looked at him for a moment with all four of her eyes pointing slightly away from each other, and then she rolled the second maps back up and put them away. "Not yet," she said. "Maybe not ever." She began stacking the first maps in order. "File what you have, analyst. See where it takes you." He wanted to ask about the second maps for the rest of the day. He didn't. His second interview was with a general. General Torv was Vorath, which meant he was large and gray and had the kind of face that had seen a lot of violence, and found it mostly boring. The Vorath were known for eating their wounded, which was not a metaphor. They were not a species that scared easily. Torv was scared. He did not perform fear. He was far too professional for that. But Velk had spent 140 years reading people across a dozen species, and he could see the careful way Torv held his shoulders, the way he had chosen a seat with his back against the wall, the way his eyes checked the door twice in the first minute. Velk asked his questions plainly. Torv answered plainly. 300 years ago, the Vorath military had run a war simulation. Not a real war, a planning exercise. A game, theoretically. They had modeled a full invasion of human-occupied space. Fleet sizes, attack routes, resource costs, projected timeline to victory. The model said they would win in 42 days. 3 of the senior analysts who built the simulation resigned immediately after it completed. Did they say why? Velk asked. One of them said the model was correct. Torv looked at the wall. That was all she said. I don't understand what that means. Neither did we. Torv stood up, which meant the interview was over in Vorath custom. We never ran the simulation again. That was 300 years ago. The decision has never been revisited. He picked up his coat. I would recommend not revisiting it, analyst. Some correct answers are not useful answers. He left. Velk sat alone in the room for a while. Then he went to his third interview. Her name was Pelha. Just Pelha. No family name, which happens sometimes among refugee populations when records were lost and names were simplified down to what fit in one line on a transit document. She was Pelhari, which was a small species, quiet, with pale blue skin and dark eyes. She had been 8 years old when her government made the decision that had cost her family everything. She did not tell him about the political details. He had those in his files. She told him what she remembered. 80 years ago, her government had been pushing into a territory dispute with a human colony. They had made a calculated choice, a show of force, they called it, a message. They had destroyed a human agricultural station, not a military base, not a fleet, a station where people grew food. Within 6 hours, 3 human warships appeared in orbit above the Pelhari capital. They did not fire. The commander came on our screens, Pelha said. Her voice was very level. She had been practicing being level for 80 years. He was alone on the feed. He looked normal. He looked calm. What did he say? He said, "We'd like to resolve this." She looked at her hands. That was all. Just that. He was smiling. What was wrong with the smile? She had clearly thought about it before, many times, in the way you think about something that happened when you were 8 years old and never quite let go. Nothing, she said. That was the problem. Nothing was wrong with it. He meant it. He actually wanted to resolve it. She looked up. Do you understand? He was not performing patience. He was not waiting for us to give him a reason. He had a reason. 3 human warships. And he wanted to resolve it anyway. And your government agreed to his terms? Every one of them, immediately. She pressed her lips together. I was 8. I asked my father why we gave them everything they asked for. He said, because of how he was smiling, Pelha. She was quiet. My father was a hard man. I never saw him afraid of anything before that day. Velk thanked her. He meant it. His last interview was with a historian. 1 arm. He did not ask about the arm. The historian did not mention it. He had a wide, worn face and spoke slowly, like each word cost him something he had budgeted carefully. He told Velk about the Kef Dominion. 2,000 years ago. A human colony. 4,000 people, farmers mostly. The Keth attacked. The humans counterattacked. Not the Keth fleet, not the military base, the Keth homeworld. They called it a proportional response. 1 word, the historian said. That's the one I keep coming back to. Proportional. They used that word for a homeworld. Velk waited. The Keth surrendered in 11 days. The historian looked at the table. I read their records, the salvaged ones. You know what surprised the Keth most? After 11 days, after everything, the humans apologized. Apologized. In writing, formally. They said they regretted the necessity. He looked up. The Keth had no framework for that. A species that burns your homeworld and then says sorry and means it. They had no file for that, analyst. No category. He put his one hand flat on the table. Neither do I, he said. And I've been trying to file it for 20 years. Velk walked back to his office alone. He read all 4 interviews in order. Then in reverse. Then he sat with the words proportional response, sitting in his mind like a stone in still water. He realized he did not know the human definition of the word proportional. He was not sure he wanted to. Outside, the station turned slowly through the dark, and the stars stayed where they always stayed, and kept their silence, as they always had, for as long as anyone had been asking questions. Commander Hana Solis was eating a breakfast taco when the diplomatic envoy arrived. She did not put it down. She was at her desk in the patrol station office, boots up on the edge of the console, a cup of coffee going cold to her left, a stack of unfinished border reports to her right, and a small framed photo of a brown dog named Biscuit behind her on the wall. The station was posted at the outer edge of the colonial territories. Not glamorous work, not terrible work, the kind of posting where nothing happened for months, and then several things happened at once, and you dealt with it, and went back to filing reports. She had been dealing with things and filing reports for 23 years. The envoy knocked. She said, "Come in." 3 figures entered. 2 council representatives and 1 Theresi analyst in a neat robe, who looked like he had not slept in a while, and was trying very hard not to show it. He looked at her. She took another bite of her taco. Commander Solis, the analyst said. His name was Velk. She had been given a briefing file on him 2 days ago, and she had read it, which she suspected was more than most people did with briefing files. "Thank you for meeting with us." "Sure," she said. She put her boots down and gestured at the chairs across from her desk. "Sit. You want coffee?" "No, thank you." "Suit yourself." She set the taco down on its wrapper and pulled her chair in. "Your request said you had questions about human territorial patterns. That's a broad subject. You want to narrow it down for me?" Velk folded his hands on the desk. He had clearly prepared for this. She could see it in the way he breathed before speaking. Slow, deliberate, like he was choosing the exact right door to walk through. "Why does no civilization attack your people?" She looked at him. She picked up her coffee, drank, set it down. "They do," she said. Something shifted behind his eyes, just slightly. "I'm sorry?" "They do attack us." She reached across and pulled up her station records on the side screen, a long scrolling list of incident reports organized by date. The Veth raided a colony in 87, took some equipment, roughed up 3 civilians. We had a whole situation with the Pelhari about 15 years back. 3 border incidents last cycle alone, 2 of which involved weapons fire. She let the list run for a moment, then looked back at him. People attack us all the time, analyst. Those incidents were resolved, he said carefully. Well, yeah, she nodded. We resolved them. The words sat there between them. He was quiet for a moment. She could see him turning it over. She waited, because she was a patient woman by profession and by nature, and because something about the way he was sitting told her this was going somewhere she hadn't been briefed on. Are you not afraid, he asked, of being attacked? She considered the question the way she considered all honest questions, straight on, without dressing it up. Sure, she said. Fear's normal. But then you deal with it, and it's done. She shrugged one shoulder. Nobody wants a long war. They're expensive. People die. Things get destroyed. You end up spending twice as much rebuilding as you spent fighting, and 10 years later, nobody remembers what it was about anyway. Some civilizations, Valk said, would say the risk of engaging with humanity at all is not worth it. Lord have mercy, that's their business. We're not hard to get along with. He stared at her. She stared back. The 2 council representatives sat very still. Is that the look, she said, where you're trying to figure out if I'm lying? No, Velk said, and she believed him. He said it flat, no hesitation. It is the look where I am trying to determine if you know what you are. She put the taco down. She had been in the fleet for 23 years. She had dealt with 3 genuine crises, 1 war that lasted 11 months, and more border disputes than she could count without her files. She had sat across from frightened people and angry people and people who hated her for what she represented, and she had learned to read a room the way other people learn to read weather. This room was something different. This room had a man in it who had come a very long way to ask a question he already half knew the answer to, and who was sitting across from her, looking like someone who had opened a door expecting a closet, and found a hallway that went further than light could reach. She thought about what she knew. She thought about the job, the actual job, not the paperwork version of it. 23 years of show up, assess, respond, resolve. 23 years of people testing the line and finding out where it was. She thought about what she had never had to explain before because no one had ever asked. She did not say any of this out loud. The way you nod when someone says a thing that is true, and you have always known it was true, but never heard it said quite that way before. Yeah, she said. Just that. Yeah. Velk was quiet for a long moment. The 2 council representatives looked at each other. The station hummed around them, the low mechanical sound of air recyclers, and the distant clunk of the docking arm, and the small ordinary sounds of a place where people worked and lived and kept the line. I have one more question, Velk said. The civilizations along the boundary of human space, the ones that dissolved, as the records say, of internal causes, were you aware? I've read your preliminary report, she said. He stopped. I got a copy 3 days ago. She met his eyes. We have people who look for things like that. The council representatives went very still. Velk did not look surprised. She noticed that. She could see him filing it. And, he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked out the viewport at the stars, just the dark, same as it always was, same as it had always been for as long as people had been looking at it and asking questions about what lived out there. We're not hard to get along with, she said again. And somehow it landed completely differently the second time. He stood. She stood. They shook hands across the desk. She noted that he held her hand carefully, like he was measuring something he couldn't name. And then he thanked her, and she said any time, and the delegation filed out of her office. She sat back down. She picked up the taco. Cold now, she ate it anyway. From the corridor, getting quieter with distance, she heard footsteps, and then a pause. Then the footsteps again, faster than before. She listened to them go. She looked at Biscuit's photo on the wall. Biscuit looked back. "Bless his heart," she said, and drank her cold coffee, and went back to her reports. Outside the viewport, the stars held their positions, steady and old, and completely unbothered, the way stars are, when they have been keeping secrets for long enough, that the secrets have started to feel like facts. The council chamber was very large, and very old, and full of the kind of silence that meant everyone in the room already knew something was wrong, and was waiting for someone else to say it first. Velk stood at the front. He had spent 11 days writing his report. Not because the facts were hard to find. He had the facts, organized and confirmed, and cross-referenced in the careful way he organized all things. He had spent 11 days trying to find the right order to put the facts in. The order mattered. These were not facts you handed to someone all at once. These were facts you walked them through, one room at a time, making sure each door closed behind them before you opened the next one. He cleared his throat. He began. He told them the investigation had started as a statistical inquiry. He told them about the 22 civilizations along the perimeter, the dissolving ones, the internal cause ones. He watched the chamber go quiet in the particular way chambers go quiet, when people stop breathing, quite as often as normal. He told them about Sue, the cartographer, and her 2 sets of maps. He told them about General Torv and the simulation that 3 analysts had quit over, whose only comment was that the result was correct. He told them about Pelha, who was 8 years old when she watched her father understand something that scared him for the rest of his life. Then he told them about the Keth. He had saved the Keth for last because the Keth were the clearest example, and clarity, in this particular investigation, was something you wanted to build toward rather than lead with. 2,000 years ago, a human colony, 4,000 people, a farming settlement in a territory the Keth considered disputed. The Keth attacked. The humans counterattacked the Keth homeworld. They called it, Velk said, a proportional response. The chamber was very quiet. The Keth homeworld, someone said from the seats. A clarifying question, not a challenge. The Keth homeworld, Velk confirmed. Not the attacking fleet, not the Keth military command, the homeworld. The humans indicated that this was the proportional and appropriate response to an attack on their colony. He paused. The Keth surrendered in 11 days. He let that sit for a moment. In the Keth records, the ones we recovered, they wrote about many things. The human fleet size, the damage, the terms of surrender. But their historians kept returning to one event above all the others. After the surrender was signed, and the terms were agreed upon, and the war was over, he looked at the room. The humans apologized. One of the senior council members made a small sound, not quite a word. A formal communication, Velk continued. They stated that they regretted the necessity of the action. They expressed genuine condolences for the loss of life. They meant it. The Keth historians noted this specifically, that it was not a performance, not a political move. The humans genuinely felt bad about what they had done. He moved on before anyone could decide how to respond to that. The Keth, he said, had no framework for this, and I submit to this council that this is the answer to my original question, not a hidden protector species, not a secret alliance, not a weapon we have failed to identify. He pulled up the perimeter map one final time. Humanity does not need protection, he said, because humanity does not stop. They fight until the concept of fighting is no longer applicable. They do not fight to win. They fight until winning is simply what has happened. And then they stop. And then they apologize if they feel they went too far. He let the map rotate slowly on the screen. The civilizations along this perimeter did not dissolve because humans destroyed them. Most of them were never attacked by humans at all. They dissolved because at some point, in a meeting, In a planning session, in a room very much like this one, someone with access to the real records looked at what happened to the Keth. And then they looked at their own expansion plans, and then they made a different choice. He pressed a key, the map closed. Some of those civilizations, he said, had already begun the process of invading human space. We found evidence in the Kreth archives, incomplete but clear enough. A voted and approved invasion plan, detailed, ready for execution. Silence. They never executed it. 8 months later, internal dissolution. No weapon, no fleet, no war. He folded his hands on the podium. I cannot prove what happened in those 8 months, but I note that humans have had functioning intelligence services since before they left their home planet. And I note that not one human official I interviewed appeared surprised by any part of my findings. He thought about Solis. The way she said yeah. Just that one word, with all the weight of 23 years behind it. He thought about how she had already read his report. He did not include this detail in his official presentation. He included it in the classified appendix, which the council would read later, and which would cause its own separate round of very quiet, very careful conversations. My conclusion, he said, is this. This was the part he had rewritten 12 times. Humanity is not a threat. They have never declared war on a civilization that did not first act against them. They have always offered terms before final escalation. They have always given the other side a chance to stop. This is consistent across 4,000 years of record. It is, in fact, the most consistent thing in the historical record. He let that land. The danger, he said quietly, is not humanity. The danger is giving them a reason. Because once they have a reason, a real one, a genuine one, they will pursue it to the end. And then they will feel bad about it. And they will rebuild what they destroyed, and they will apologize, and they will mean every word. He looked at the room. I do not have a form for this conclusion. I looked for one. There is no category in the Bureau's filing system for what I am describing. He gathered his papers. The council can find somewhere to put it. He stepped back from the podium. The chamber was still. No one spoke for a long moment. The kind of moment where everyone is doing the same mental calculation, and no one wants to be the first to say what the answer is. He walked out of the chamber. In the corridor, alone, he stopped. He stood with his back against the wall, and took a breath. Then another. His hands were still. He checked, specifically, because after the meeting with Solis, he had started checking. They were still. He reached into his coat pocket. He took out the small piece of paper he had been carrying for 3 months, the one he had written on the night he first found the perimeter, the one with 2 words on it. Proportional response. He still didn't know why. He folded the paper very carefully and put it back in his pocket. He did not throw it away. He walked back toward his office, and the 17 monitors, and the cold tea, and the 43 years of neatly organized files. And he thought about a farming station, and 11 days, and an apology that meant everything, and explained nothing. And he was grateful. Quietly, deeply, in the specific animal way that gratitude arrives when you finally understand how close the edge has always been. Grateful that they had never given humanity a real reason. Grateful, too, that humanity had never stopped offering terms first. Both of those things mattered equally. The report leaked on a Wednesday. Velk did not know it was a Wednesday. That was still a human word he had not learned. He only knew it was 9 days after the council presentation, and that he was at his desk, filing the classified appendix, when his personal comm made a sound it had never made before. The specific tone that meant something had gone from restricted to public, without going through the correct channels first. He opened the news feed. His report was on the front page of 46 major galactic publications. He sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a while. He was not entirely surprised. He had written a report concluding that 22 civilizations had effectively ended themselves rather than start a war with humanity, and he had presented it to a council that contained members from 30 species, several of whom had complicated and competing reasons for wanting that information either buried or broadcast. He had known, in the professional part of his brain that handled these calculations, that the report would not stay quiet. Information like that had too much weight to stay still. Still, he had hoped. The feeds ran for 3 days. Every major species had a reaction. The Vorath released a military statement that said, in the careful official language of military statements, essentially nothing, but said it very firmly. The Uleni Cartographers Guild issued a brief note confirming that their records were consistent with the report's findings. 2 of the dissolved civilization's successor states called for emergency sessions. And then, on the 4th day, Earth responded. The statement came through official diplomatic channels. Quiet, procedurally correct. The kind of document that had been reviewed and worded and reviewed again by people who understood that every single word was going to be read in translation by 30 different species with 30 different histories. Velk read it 3 times. The first paragraph thanked the Bureau for the thoroughness of the investigation. The second paragraph noted that the report's conclusions were broadly accurate. The third paragraph was 4 sentences. Humanity wishes to clarify one point. We have never attacked a civilization that did not first act against our people. We have never escalated beyond what we considered necessary. We have always offered terms before the final option. And then, we would like to reiterate that we are not difficult to get along with. We hope this report serves as a useful resource for civilizations that are considering their options. Warmly, Earth Colonial Authority. Velk read the word warmly and put the document down. He picked it up again, read the word again. He had read maybe 30,000 official diplomatic documents in his career. He had never seen one signed warmly. It was not a diplomatic word. It was a personal word. The kind of word you used when you were writing to a friend, or to someone you were genuinely glad to hear from. Or, and this was the interpretation that sat in his chest like a coal, the kind of word you used when you wanted the reader to understand, very clearly, without saying it plainly, that you were not angry, that you had read every word of the report and understood exactly what it meant, and you were still, after all of it, warm. He looked at the signature for a long time. Then he set the document aside and pulled up the Galactic news feed. The reactions to the human statement were varied. Several species issued formal expressions of diplomatic respect. A few issued no statement at all, which was its own kind of statement. The Kreth successor state, a smaller and much quieter civilization than the original Dominion had ever been, released one sentence. We have no comment. We have never had any conflict with humanity. Which was technically accurate, and told Velk everything about what they knew and chose not to say. He spent the day reading responses. He began drafting a follow-up summary for the Bureau's records, a document that would probably be read by very few people and stored in a section of the archive that most analysts never visited. That was fine. He had always been good at writing documents for small audiences. On the 5th day, he did something unusual. He took the afternoon off. He was not a person who took afternoons off. He had taken 3 personal leave days in the last 20 years, and all 3 had been for medical reasons. But the investigation was done, the report was public, the follow-up summary was drafted, and he felt, not tired exactly, but like a container that had been filled past its line, and needed to sit still for a while before it could hold anything new. He walked to the observation deck at the top of the station. It was an old deck, not often used. The viewport curved all the way around so that you could see in nearly every direction at once. He stood there for a long time, in the quiet, and looked at the stars. He thought about the perimeter map. He thought about 22 civilizations and their dotted lines. He thought about a cartographer with a second set of maps she had not been ready to show him, and a general who had never run a simulation twice, and a woman who had been 8 years old when fear walked into her house and put its coat on the rack and never quite left. He thought about Celise and the way she had said, "Yeah." He reached into his pocket and took out the piece of paper. Proportional response. He looked at it for a moment. Then he put it back. He went to his office and sat down and opened a new message and wrote a single line to Commander Hannah Celise of the Earth Colonial Fleet. Commander Celise, I have one final question. The human word, Tuesday. You used it during our meeting. What does it mean? He sent it and went back to his summary document. Her reply came 11 minutes later. It's just a day. Boring one, usually. Nothing day. He read it. He nodded to himself slowly, the way he nodded when a data point confirmed a theory he had been building for months. He typed back, I see. Thank you, Commander. I have begun calling certain things Tuesday. It helps. He sent it and closed the message window and did not think too hard about what he had meant by it, because some things were understood better when they were not examined directly. His office was quiet. The 17 monitors hummed. The cold tea sat where it always sat. Outside, the station rotated through the dark the way it always rotated, slowly, steadily, doing the same job it had always done. He pulled up the original file, the Kreth Dominion record with the brown stain at the bottom from the tea he had spilled on a day that was apparently called a Tuesday. He looked at the word negligible where the stain had dried. He thought about 4,000 people on a farming station. He thought about 11 days. He thought about an apology that was completely genuine from a species that had just burned a homeworld and genuinely, deeply wished they had not had to. He thought about warmly. And he was, for a long time, very still. Not afraid, not unafraid. Just sitting with the knowledge of what was out there, of what had always been out there, patient and reasonable and genuinely not difficult to get along with, provided you understood what get along with meant to them, and finding that the knowledge sat differently now than it had 3 months ago when he first spilled the tea. It was not the kind of thing you put in a neat file and closed, but it was honest, and it was true. And in 43 years of working with records, Velk had learned that honest, true things were better to carry than comfortable false ones, even when they were heavier. He filed the last document. He turned off 15 of the 17 monitors. He left the perimeter map on one screen and the star chart on another. He looked at them side by side, the circle made of dissolved civilizations, and the wide dark where the stars went on forever. And then he turned those off too. He put on his coat. He went home. He made tea, and this time when he poured it, his hands were steady. He did not spill a single drop. He sat in his kitchen and drank it warm, and thought about nothing in particular, which was a thing he had not been able to do in 3 months, and which felt in its own quiet way like something very close to peace. Outside, the galaxy went on doing what it had always done, turning, expanding, full of civilizations that rose and fell and made choices about which lines to cross and which to leave alone. And somewhere in the outer colonial territories, on a patrol station at the edge of human space, Commander Hannah Celise read Velk's message and laughed. Just a short, quiet laugh, the kind that lives just below a sigh, and said, "Bless his heart," to a framed photo of a brown dog named Biscuit, and went back to her reports. Some questions, when you finally found the answer, turned out to be simple. Humanity was not dangerous because they were cruel. They were what they were because they were stubborn and patient, and they always offered terms first, and they genuinely felt bad when things went further than they wanted. and they got up the next day and filed the paperwork and moved on. That was the whole answer. It was also, somehow, the most terrifying thing in all the records. And the most hopeful. Both. At once. Silence. That was the Tuesday of it.